Oi. My name is Cindy, I'm an alcoholic.
In the microphone.
And I don't like this thing in
Yes,
my
you do.
hand. So, I don't even know what I'm going to say here. But I can say that I'm standing here after 40 years without a drink or a drug. Under the cross. It's the first time in my life I've ever been under this. And my thought says, he must increase and I must decrease.
Into the microphone.
He must increase and I must decrease. And that's what that cross says behind me. So, I gotta bring my humor into it or I won't be able to relax. So earlier, past couple of days, we've been talking a lot and I'm like, I don't like my name. Cindy. Everybody always called me Sin. And I'm listening to Rachel. I said to her earlier, she's in the Bible, Talitha's in the Bible. So as I'm sitting back there, I am not well. I Google how many times sin is in the Bible. 565 times. So Cody says to me, lest you forget. Okay, so here's my story, very little, because my story doesn't really begin until 5 years ago. So 40 years ago, in a month, God brought me to the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is a sword place for me, trust me. And my life begins. My life begins. The grace of God makes me a blackout drinker. And as it talks about the 6th and 7th step, it was lifted. I believed in the same God that Sheldon had. We talked about it this week, that punishing God, God will find you. And I live my life forward and I understand it backwards. And in thinking about this all week, I'm thinking about I probably was agnostic, is the way that I was never an atheist. But I was a naughty girl. And I love the effects produced by alcohol. I love the takeoffs. I'm a feel-good junkie. I love when my heart palpitates. I love the effects produced by God. It took me a long time, 68 years to find my rabbi. But I tell you today that my heart is transformed. I called Stevie at one point and I had read something. The only one that can transform or open your heart is the one that created it.
Amen.
I've got no power. So here's what happens. You know, I come into Alcoholics Anonymous and it was lifted. And it was good enough. It was good enough. I've got some privilege in my life. I had a husband that adored me. I went through the death of my parents. I went through the death of my sister. I went through some things in recovery. And it was okay. It was okay. My God was good enough. He was small, but he was enough. Until 5 years ago. Stevie used the word today. I was not prepared for this. Where I got diagnosed with cancer. Stage 4 cancer. And as I tell you today, I don't even remember this from drinking. The fear, the anxiety, the loneliness when somebody says to you, you've got stage 4 cancer. I didn't have the courage, as Paul talks about, to get through death on my own. And I remembered, it's amazing how this happens because things resonate with me today that I've heard for years. I remember Sheldon telling me about somebody. He says, I'm glad my eyes got open before they closed. And mine were not. Mine were not. That fear, that anxiety, that loneliness that only us alcoholics know, that terror, that bewilderment, that frustration, that despair, that all the 4 steps, all the 12 steps, all the checking off the boxes couldn't do it because that secret ingredient was missing. Right? Cindy was still too big and my God was too small. So I went to my home group, a 4:30 group that most of you know that I went to. And Pastor Steve, that I've known for years, said, why don't you come to church each Sunday? And I was was to meet my partner and his sponsor there. And they didn't show. This is 5 years ago, before the pandemic. And at the end, the pastor Steve says, if there's anybody full of fear who wants to give their life to the Lord, please come up. As Russell says when he talks, I look around to see if anybody's looking, right? God forbid. And I go up. And Steve says to me, he anointed my head with oil. Being brought up Jewish, the only prayer I ever knew was the 23rd Psalm, because they say it at all the funerals. And he anointed my head with oil, and he said, now the big book is going to come alive, and I want you to go home and read the 23rd Psalm. I'm getting chills thinking about it. And that was the beginning. That was the beginning. That was the beginning. And then pandemic happens, and then I start following Russell. And Russell was my Ebby. That line in the big book, I knew there was something more that Bill Dodson says when he looks at Bill Wilson in the end. There was a happiness, there was peace beyond all understanding that I never experienced. Because there was still that void. There was that piece of that jigsaw puzzle that was missing, even with checking off all the boxes. In other words, I didn't have the power. I didn't have the power to overcome all the emotions that go along with fear, anxiety, terror. We all know them. We all know them. And so it began. And so then I came and I met Russell. And of course, I mean, hello, let's be honest. You know, I mean, probably had he, you know, I mean, listen, Jesus was a carpenter and he wasn't wearing Gucci loafers, or I might have found him over. You know, so Russell's resume was appealing. Hello. And I started to follow. I started to follow the eyes of the believer. Now, before I got diagnosed, this is crazy. The first testimony I heard of Russell was he was talking about a guy by the name of Al Kennedy. I had no idea where I was going to be diagnosed. And I never, ever, ever talk about this in AA. My sponsor directed me to share this. So he talked about a guy named Al Kennedy that had 6 months to live, and that all he wanted to do was help people. And I prayed that I could be an Al Kennedy in Alcoholics Anonymous. I prayed that I could be an Al Kennedy in Alcoholics Anonymous. And so that's really where it began. And I began to believe, and I began to trust, and I began to feel love, and I began to feel that my head was anointed with oil, my cup was running over. And then I got a reoccurrence. And they told me I had months to live, 1.5 years ago. And Kimmy had made plans for us to go to Israel to be baptized. And every medical person told me, you can't go, it's going to progress, you don't have time. And we went. We went. And I got baptized. And when I got up, I looked for the dove. It was a geese. It was a geese, but it was close. It was close. And Dickie. And it changed my life. It changed my life. I was reborn. I was reborn. So, too much is given, much is expected. So what happened? I went from Judge Judy, my mother's name was Judy, to a God that embraced me, that comforted me. That when I got out of that surgery, and they told me that you have months, and something happened on the table, because they didn't have to remove all that they did because it had metastasized. And I was so grateful. And I had no moment of fear. Because as Paul talks about in Philippians, I didn't have the courage to face death. Right? Which means if I didn't have the courage to face death, I didn't have the courage to live. And don't worry about tomorrow, today will take care of itself. And too much is given, much is demanded. And I live my life every single day as a blessing. So Jesus came into my heart, because the only one who could change it and open it was him. And my friend Al, is he here somewhere, said to to me, you must get smaller, self must die. And 2 years ago I came up and I chased it. I chased it quietly. And I gotta tell you, I'm not Jude. I mean, I look at Dare, I look at Kimmy, my life is so big, it's huge. When I came in here, it was so small. It was so small. My sponsor just sent me at 3:13. I sent it to Rachel, because she knows I don't like doing this. And she says, be the beacon of light. You shine bright instead of a trigger. Be a beamer, all right? It's not in the words. It's in the miner's eyes. Show that I know everybody in this room. And so the greatest gift that he has given me is love. I love. Now, I don't like all of you. You know what I mean? He says, love me with all my heart, with all my soul, with all my might. And then love your neighbor. Doesn't mean I have to like them. Doesn't mean I have to break bread with them all. But here's what's happening. In loving, I'm loved and I feel it. I feel it. The heart is full. The only thing I ever wanted in life was to feel connected and full. You guys brought me that. So I went from me to he through this week. Can't do it alone.